3 shots fired in 30 seconds changed America forever. The gunfight at the OK Corral wasn't just another Wild West shootout. It was the moment that proved lawmen could stand against outlaws and win. When the smoke cleared, 3 cowboys lay dead, and the Earp brothers and Doc Holliday had survived. But here's what most people don't know. This single gunfight helped spark a shift toward formal marshals and sheriffs across boomtowns, beginning a transformation that would reshape the American frontier. The consequences reached far beyond Tombstone, Arizona. 2 later events would apply completely different strategies: political exposure and armed community defense, to finish what the OK Corral started. Before we continue with these famous shootouts, hit subscribe to never miss another gripping tale from the Wild West. What happened in those 30 seconds revealed the true nature of outlaw power in the American West. Before October 26, 1881, a loosely allied group of cowboys who used intimidation and political connections to evade justice owned Tombstone, Arizona. They weren't just cattle thieves. They controlled the entire region through fear and corrupt ties to local officials. For months, they had stolen livestock, threatened merchants, and murdered anyone who opposed them. Sheriff Johnny Behan received regular payments to ignore their crimes. County officials looked the other way when cowboys rode through town armed and drunk. The cowboys understood that their power came from fear. They made public examples of anyone who challenged them. When they killed a man, they left the body in the street as a warning. When they robbed a business, they burned it down if the owner complained. This systematic intimidation had worked for years across multiple territories. Wyatt Earp arrived in Tombstone with his brothers Morgan and Virgil, along with their friend Doc Holliday. They had worked as lawmen in Kansas cattle towns, where they developed a reputation for professionalism rather than gunfighting heroics. The Earps studied the cowboys' operation and realized something crucial. The gang's power depended entirely on the perception that they were untouchable. If that perception could be shattered, their entire system would collapse. The cowboys controlled Tombstone through their network of corrupt officials. They moved stolen cattle across the Mexican border and sold them to corrupt officials who asked no questions about brands or ownership. The Earp brothers calculated that a public confrontation would either establish legitimate law enforcement or destroy them completely. On October 26, 1881, the confrontation finally came. The Earps and Doc Holliday faced Frank McGlory, Tom McGlory, Billy Clanton, and Ike Clanton near the OK Corral. The shooting lasted exactly 30 seconds. When the gunfire stopped, Frank McGlory, Tom McGlory, and Billy Clanton lay dead. The Earps had survived. Telegraph lines carried news of the Earps' victory across the frontier. For the first time, professional lawmen had defeated an organized outlaw gang in direct combat. But this victory against local corruption was just the beginning. Elsewhere in the West, a different kind of battle was brewing, one that would expose corruption reaching all the way to territorial governments. In New Mexico territory, the Lincoln County War exposed something far more sinister than cattle rustling: a corrupt political machine that controlled an entire territory through systematic manipulation of government power. The Santa Fe Ring operated as a shadow government across New Mexico, using their connections to dominate every aspect of the economy. They controlled land grants, awarded themselves lucrative government contracts, and manipulated the courts to crush anyone who threatened their monopoly. Lawrence Murphy and James Dolan ran the House, a mercantile operation that served as the ring's primary weapon against competition. Their general store held a stranglehold on Lincoln County's economy, charging inflated prices for goods while paying ranchers below market rates for cattle. When smaller merchants tried to compete, the House used political connections to have them arrested on fabricated charges or denied access to credit and supplies. John Tunstall arrived from England with enough capital to challenge this system directly. He partnered with lawyers and cattle barons to establish a competing store and bank. Tunstall's operation offered fair prices and honest dealing, threatening to expose the House's exploitation of local ranchers and merchants. The ring responded with violence. In February 1878, Sheriff William Brady led a posse that murdered Tunstall in cold blood. Brady was a ring operative who used his badge to eliminate threats to their monopoly. The killing was designed to send a message: anyone who challenged their control would die. But the murder backfired spectacularly. Billy the Kid had been working for Tunstall when the murder occurred. The young gunfighter joined Alexander McSween's regulators as part of an organized resistance movement fighting systematic government corruption. The regulators initially received legal deputization to arrest Tunstall's killers, but the ring's control of the courts made legitimate justice impossible. When Sheriff Brady refused to arrest the murderers, the regulators killed him in a Lincoln Street ambush. The violence escalated into the 5-day Battle of Lincoln, where ring-backed gunmen besieged McSween's house. The conflict ended with McSween's death and the destruction of much of Lincoln's main street. Federal officials in Washington began receiving reports about the chaos in New Mexico. President Rutherford Hayes appointed General Lew Wallace as territorial governor under the Insurrection Act, with explicit instructions to investigate territorial corruption and restore order. Wallace arrived with federal backing and began dismantling the ring's power structure. Billy the Kid emerged from this conflict as America's first anti-establishment folk hero. His fight against the ring resonated with ordinary citizens who understood that sometimes outlaws represented the people against corrupt authority. The Dalton gang had perfected their system over 2 years of successful robberies across Kansas and Oklahoma, always staying one step ahead of law enforcement through superior firepower and quick escapes. On October 5, 1892, Bob, Grat, and Emmett Dalton planned what they believed would be their masterpiece, simultaneously robbing both the First National Bank and the Condon Bank in Coffeyville, Kansas. The gang expected the usual pattern that had worked for years across the West. Citizens would hide in their homes and businesses, while the outlaws took what they wanted. Shop owners would lock their doors and wait for the violence to pass. Local law enforcement would arrive too late to matter, but telegraph communications had fundamentally changed how information traveled across the frontier. Unlike previous decades when outlaw gangs could operate in relative isolation, Coffeyville residents had received advance warnings about the Dalton gang's movements through telegraph lines. The alerts gave citizens time to prepare weapons and discuss defensive strategies. When the shooting began, something unprecedented happened. Instead of cowering in fear, ordinary citizens grabbed rifles and revolvers and fought back. Shopkeepers, clerks, farmers, and business owners turned Coffeyville's main street into a battlefield. The crossfire caught the gang members completely off guard. The battle lasted approximately 15 minutes and transformed the quiet Kansas town into a war zone. The gang members found themselves surrounded and outgunned by determined townspeople who refused to let their community be terrorized. When the smoke cleared, 4 gang members lay dead, including Bob and Grat Dalton, along with Bill Power and Dick Broadwell. Only Emmett Dalton survived, badly wounded and captured by the citizens who had destroyed his gang. This citizen resistance demonstrated that communities could successfully defend themselves against organized outlaws. The news of Coffeyville's victory spread through telegraph networks, inspiring similar defensive preparations across the frontier. These 3 conflicts destroyed the entire system that made the Wild West wild through distinct transformations. The gunfight at the OK Corral proved professional lawmen could defeat organized gangs, establishing formal law enforcement. The Lincoln County War exposed territorial corruption and forced federal oversight. The Battle of Coffeyville demonstrated that armed citizens could successfully defend their communities against outlaw raids. These shootouts collectively sealed the Wild West's fate, making cleanup possible and paving the way for modern police, courts, and community self-defense. Which of these 3 confrontations do you think was most pivotal in ending the outlaw era? Share your thoughts in the comments below.